And of course, as I earlier on said, we are joined on this other side from studios. We have with us SITATI WASILWA. SITATI is not a newcomer to KOTFM fraternity. He's been here in the past, and probably tonight is also here to share with us some of his knowledge. But I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself, and then we can be able to proceed. SITATI, if you can hear me, the mic is yours.
Many thanks, LIKUYANI, as you've introduced my name. I am SITATI WASILWA. I am a geopolitical and governance analyst, and looking forward to tonight's conversation. And let's see how it rolls. I mean, there are so many issues to go over, so hopefully we shall be able to at least have a clear context on some of them, but also at the same time to, at least bring in different angles and perspectives to encourage more debates and more other different opinions on the same. Thanks.
Asante sana kaka Wasilwa, and we will definitely be having a very interesting discussion based on the issues that have happened through the week. So if you're joining us, feel free to have this conversation with us. And as we earlier on also indicated, we are live on both X. We are also on our X broadcast. We are also live on our KOTFM channel, and you can also watch this and stream live as you're listening. Now, let's get to the matters that OBEDS earlier on mentioned, and let me start with a specific one. SITATI, you have paid attention to the regional news. You know what has happened across the board, and the scandal that is surrounding the passport issuance to the RSF, I would say, integral team, which includes the brother to the Hemeti, and Kenya now being on the spotlight. Maybe let me take a cue from you. What exactly do you make out of all this scenario, and are we in a bad space in matters IR?
Well, that tells you that Kenya's foreign policy orientation under the Kenya Kwanza administration is, it's scandalous. It borders on the thin lines of being classified as perhaps promoting a criminal enterprise. This is not the first time that we are seeing associations or close links between the Kenya Kwanza administration with Hemedi Dagalo, the leader of the Rapid Support Forces that has been fighting with the Sudanese army for the last 4 or so years. And it definitely confirms, what many Kenyans and many other interested people across, whether it's Africa or the world, what they've been suspecting for far too long, that Kenya is not, or the Kenya Kwanza administration is not really, demonstrating that it is interested in mediating over the conflict in Sudan, but it is much more interested in perhaps, the war economy. It's benefiting from the war economy, the process of the war economy from Sudan. Last year, when some time back, was it last year when Hemedi visited Kenya? I think there are so many concerns. But what I wrote at that point, at that time, and which has been confirmed, by many other sources, that perhaps what Kenya is benefiting by associating with the Rapid Support Forces has to do with maybe some, illicit trade in gold. Because this also goes as far as involving the United Arab Emirates, and it's a whole scheme of things. And I think apart from the illicit maybe gold trade, there are credible sources, indicating that there could be also proceeds of money laundering and those sorts of issues. So it's a whole part of issues which brings into the fore that this administration is not really positioning itself to resolve the conflicts around the region, but also seeking to, what we call, it's engaging itself in rent-seeking kind of opportunities. LIKUYANI.
All right, rent-seeking opportunities. Not the first time that Hemeti's team and this administration is involving itself in matters, what we say, under dealings and undercuttings within the region. probably, Obeds, you have a question or two in the same respect. I'll cross over to you and let's find out what you think about where we are so far. Obeds.
SITATI captures it quite well. So there's much more, I think, that involves the current regime in its architecture. And when you look at, especially the people around the president, his cronies, and the kind of things that they're engaging in, it clearly tells you, even before we had this regime set up, it was quite clear that the number of Kenyans that are engaged in activities that are illegal were many and associated with the presidency, or sorry, the president. And that was raised as a red flag, and people dismissed. But you can see his associate, Hemeti, when Kenyans asked questions about what Kenya was doing, there was an argument that Kenya is mediating. But now, when you scratch below the surface, remember the saga we had of Kenyan ammunition being found in Sudan and clearly marked as Kenyan. And then you have a situation where, like Sitati says, you can see the hand of the UAE in all this, especially from Dubai. You've seen your president appear and be seen taking photos, and it's not hearsay; it's a fact. It's something that can be proven. The photos are available, and the people that he met are the ones who put the photos out there. He has entertained Hemeti at the State House. He has entertained a Zimbabwean non-criminal at State House. And that's the link between, because this guy is engaged in illegal trade, especially of gold, and it's quite clear. But when this is pointed out, then Kenyans don't respect the presidency and the man, and the man at State House. What this means, in my view, is that we have decided and we have proven that the Achilles heel for this government is matters our foreign policy orientation. We are all over. And we haven't fronted our country. And I don't even know how we're trying to project ourselves. Because maybe had the Americans not been looking for this man, and did he not try to access the US using a Kenyan passport, we probably wouldn't have known as the general public. But it is not unusual. It's not the first time this is happening. And I think if we dug further, you'd find out that register of persons, especially at um, under the Ministry of Interior, is a crime scene because there are people who have gotten passports and national IDs that are not nationals, and it's there. Some people have sold our sovereignty because it's easy to come to Kenya and then find your way out of this country to another country, and so it is demonstrated. Is a matter that is proven that we probably need to rework and rethink how we want to relate with other people, but then to entertain people who are known to be people who are killing their own and honestly give a Kenyan passport to such people is a problem for us. Now, Kenyans traveling in the days to come, there'll be questions about your passport. Yes, it looks genuine, but then are you truly Kenyan? You might be selected in quotes for those who travel, you know that you've been selected for a random check and something. And that's not going to be, it's not going to bode very well for us. Other countries that are given as a free pass to go to their countries might have start to have questions and have question marks around nationalities. And so the US might not have a lot of questions about that and might not say anything because when you think about it, uh, it's always about interest, and Kenya serves a very important function for them, and especially with the expansion of the Manda Bay facility that they want to increase the capacity of that space. Obviously, then they might look on the other side and ask, I mean, whatever it is, as long as it does not affect our business and you ensure that it's okay, maybe they wouldn't ask anything. So there are ways to look at it. It paints a bad picture for us, but then the person who probably suffer more and most is the ordinary folk and not the people who are in power because them they always have the protection of the state as it is for now.
I hear you, OBEDS, and you talk about the protection of the state, and you talk about how we look bad in the international space, and specifically for the Kenyan traveler. Does it bother you that much, Sitati? Because, I mean, it's not the first time such scandals are happening, is it?
Yeah, but you see now the case of the Rapid Support Forces, Dagalo Hemedi, and all those issues. Even related to that man from Zimbabwe who is a well-known fraud. We saw his associations with the president of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu, and a few other well-known individuals, powerful individuals across Africa. But you see, in the case of Hemedi, look at this. You have a Kenyan administration that is well known, of course, to have committed some crimes against humanity. I mean, if we are to put it as it is, the last 2 years or 2.5, what has happened? I mean, in relation to the crackdown on peaceful protesters, enforced disappearances, those are crimes against humanity. So locally associated with, or rather directly linked to crimes against humanity, and abroad, criminals who've been said to, the kind of issues or, the targeting of civilians in Darfur and many other places in Sudan. I mean, it qualifies, it borders on the line of being classified as part of the genocide. So this is a very unique case, which I don't really think is going to augur well for Kenyans. I mean, in relation to the passport strengths, the rankings and the powers that are concerned with it. So it's definitely a very big concern, in my view.
All right, Sitati, you say it's a very big concern in your view, and that's why all of us are having this conversation. In case you missed it, well, Kenya is not really trading very well or trending very well in the international space, especially having had warlord family linked to passport scandal from the immigration department. There's an issue that arises out of this, Sitati, and it's something that OBEDS also mentioned. That is the Nyayo House being a crime scene or a possible crime scene. Now, when you look at the issuance of passport to such, I will say in quotes, high-level connected individuals, is it really a junior staff issue? What would you consider this?
Never. I mean, it can never be a junior staff issue. This definitely has, connections to some of the highest offices that we can think about. I mean, you have all the freedom to speculate. A junior staff member or a junior officer in those offices at Nyayo House, the immigration offices or department, can not do such kind of things. Just like the way we've had these, agencies which have been recruiting Kenyans to go and fight in Russia. You cannot implicate some junior officers trying to, engage in this kind of scandalous affairs. It definitely has to do everything to do with the powers that be in this country, and that is a problem. And I can tell you for a fact, without any fear of contradiction, that the issuance of these passports then definitely comes with many other trade-offs and exchanges. You give me the diplomatic passports to fly around the world, and then what do you get in return? And we have a situation where we will be going in for elections next year. And we also have politicians and their wheeler dealers who are out to cash in and make money from, many other enterprises for their own riches. So definitely it's linked to the powerful people in Kenya's political system. That one cannot be further from the truth whatsoever.
All right, I hear you, Sitati, and I'm also happy that we are joined with other, speakers that are online. If you have time and you love to pick up the mic, kindly do that. We don't want to extend this conversation for far too long, and therefore just make your way on the speakers channel as soon as practical. OBEDS, I don't know if there's anything coming from your end. I'm going to hand over the mic to you because I would love for us to also look deeply on the issue within the region, SITATI. There has been, recently we woke up to the news of the elimination of Nanga, and probably I would love for you to touch something on the same because you have been paying attention to the regional bloc and what has been happening, especially in DRC Congo. But let's have you, OBEDS. Anything from your end, OBEDS?
Yeah, probably just to point out that there's an assumption, maybe for the people who are engaged in this business, that nobody would bother to find out. And there was a belief probably no Kenyan would know, and it didn't matter. But it's as much as it's concerning, it's nothing new and nothing shocking, because past regimes have done their things. Probably that they haven't come to the fore doesn't mean that it's a good thing to happen. We must safeguard our borders and ensure that, because you see, we even had a situation where we were vetting Kenyans who live along the borders to ensure that we don't give our documentation to the wrong people. But look, a situation where you have to do a trade-off. There must be a benefit, obviously, to the people who are in power for them to allow such things to happen. And it wouldn't have probably come to the fore, as we said, unless the Americans brought it up. In relation to Nanga's death, I mean, Eli, you live by the gun, you die by the gun. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. There's probably much that I haven't followed to understand exactly what are the details, but it's an interesting and not unfortunate situation, but that's what it is. So there's a lot going on in Congo. There's so much. There's internal fights within themselves. There's also situations that probably deals or people disagreeing on what should be and how it should be done. And so, unfortunately, that has to be dealt with as such. But it has an implication and must be seen to be exactly that. I can't belabor the point. I think that's what I have to say. Maybe we get to hear from other speakers. I don't know if you have time for Western or you have SITATI and then you get to hear from Western.
I'll definitely go to SITATI and come to you, Western. So stand by for that. SITATI, I don't know if you agree with OBEDS about the issue of internal wrangles amongst the Congolese, because this has been reported so. However, there are indications that there's a lot of external force that is creating the destabilization in the Congo region, and specifically the elimination of Nanga. He also argues you kill by the gun, you die by one. Very diplomatic, I don't know. Very not diplomatic. Let me hear you say, sir. Just a second. Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
you see, when you think about the Congo, or when you try to make sense of the events in the Congo, especially in the eastern part of the Congo, then I think you have to really go back down the history pathway to the colonial times, what happened in the country. You have to go to the events that surrounded the independence period, and certainly after independence. I mean, Congo, I think the only time probably there was some semblance of peace and some sort of stability, though we can't really say it was stable as such. Just a few years after Mobutu became the president, but then definitely as soon as he became president, 10 years into his presidency or so, there are uprisings in several parts of the country. So the issue of what is happening in the eastern part of the DRC at this time in relation to the March 23 movement rebels, then again, you have to revisit the events that took place in the region, especially in Rwanda in 1994 with the genocide. The Hutus definitely were put to the DRC. I mean, they sought refuge in the DRC. And then, because Kagame had come in with his Rwanda Patriotic Front, that time it was a rebel group from Uganda, after assisting Museveni to overthrow the government in Uganda, went into, Rwanda took over power. And then the Hutus, they started regrouping in various camps in the DRC with the hope that they'd go back and get rid of the Tutsi-led regime. So it's it's a history that is, written in so many dynamics. I mean, dynamics, cultural dynamics, economic, you know, and many other fronts as well. So at this time, even recently, when Willy Ngoma was taken out, the spokesperson of the March 23 movement, and a few other senior leaders, I mean, to me, I don't really look at it as a matter or an issue that you know is going to weaken that particular rebel movement, because we must remember a few things here. Number one, the March 23 movement is obviously supported by Rwanda, and like you said, Likuyani, the issues in the Congo are definitely driven by external factors. And in this case, many people mention, about the Western influence and who. But Rwanda is the biggest player in the geostrategic, movements that we see down there in the Congo. So Kagame has, for a very long time, for decades, he's always been, an ally of the West, especially the United States. And if you saw reports by a few Western publications, including the Wall Street Journal, I think, was it last night and today morning? A few weeks ago, the United States had imposed some sanctions, intended to impose some sanctions on some March 23, I think, some Rwandan high ranking government officials linked to the March 23 movement. But I mean, Kagame used his means through one of the most notorious senators in the US. And what did he do? He managed to get to that senator. That senator lobbied with the Trump administration to cut back on the sanctions and not to impose them. So I don't see in any way, as much as people are saying, oh, okay, this is now the time that the DRC military is going to get rid of those rebels. I don't think it's as easy as people think it is. It's going to be quite complex. I don't anticipate a scenario where the United States is going to maybe, let's say, directly, order for or assist directly, give military assistance directly to the Congolese government to take out the rebels. I don't see that happening. And the only way, and I can tell you without any fear of contradiction, the only way that the Congolese government can be able to settle the issue in the eastern part of the DRC is to be open to compromise and, to some very large extent, allow Kagame to get and the rebels to get their share of the sort of mineral supply chains that they control.
Why do you strategically change the wording from allow Kagame to get to allow the rebels, having said that the rebels are highly linked with the Kagame regime?
I mean, they are one and the same thing, and if probably you heard me clearly,
yeah,
you can't run away from the fact that you see, Rwanda is directly benefiting from the mineral supply chains in the eastern part of the DRC, which are controlled by the rebels, from the March 23 movement group. So you can't really delink one from the other. They are closely tied, to the hip.
All right. I hear you, sir. And probably this is something that we cannot just walk over and assume that the elimination of Nanga is the end of M23 movement with all the issues you've been able to raise. One would have imagined the negotiations that happened in the US would definitely, change the narrative in the region. But clearly, looks like everyone is pulling out on Trump. We saw Zimbabwe deciding to say we are ending this negotiation on the issue of healthcare. Arrangement with the billions that were coming in. So did Zambia. I don't know if Kenya intends to do the same, because it's been an issue within the public domain. Everyone is saying, why do we have to trade off our data? Maybe a very quick touch on that before I move to back to the X space where we have Western on standby.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's only the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I think to the surprise of many, even Burkina Faso, surprisingly, I've seen they have agreed to health agreement, I think, with other related stuff with the United States. So sometimes I think when people support most of these regimes, it's important also to understand that there's so much that goes, there's so much water that goes under the bridge. Now, in the case of the Congo, Tshisekedi as the president, you have to understand him. He's a little bit desperate. In as much as he wants the minerals, or he wants to get rid of the rebels in the eastern DRC, I think he's very much ignorant of the crisis, the complexities of the security situation, especially in the eastern part of the Congo. He is desperate in a way that he wants to quicken, allow all these American companies to go into the eastern Congo, get the minerals, and then have money for the government. But of course, he also has his own personal interest. So I think in terms of context, Zambia with their president Hichilema, they can say no, this is not what you want. But I mean, for Shisekedi, I understand him. I mean, as much as it's a controversial deal, a little bit maybe awkward, it could interfere with the DRC sovereignty. But I mean, that is the DRC for you. I don't really think that there is a president in the history of the Democratic Republic of Congo who's been able to exercise his sovereignty to the fullest. That one has never happened, and probably it will never happen in our lifetime. So it's not a surprise. I mean, with the Congo, it's just the nature of things, the way they've been done there since the 1960s.
There you have it, Obed. That's how things work, especially with the situation in DRC. You don't expect much of it, and sometimes, that's how geopolitics function. Let's cross over back to the X-Space session where we do have Obed, and tells me Western is also on standby. I know Western to be very fiery. I hope he has some left in his, in his ammunition. Let's, Obed, the mic is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. No much from my end. Let's allow Western to make his contribution. I think I also appreciate the fact that, as SITATI says, most presidents and people who've been in charge of DRC have been conflicted, and you can understand. But it's one situation in the heart of Africa that is too complex to just propose a simple kind of solution, so to speak. Western, I don't like boxing you because you're well versed in matters, IR and geopolitics. I'd like to allow you to give us your overview on the situation, the passport situation in Kenya, and also probably generally in matters IR and regional politics. I'll give you 5 minutes to prosecute your case.
OBEDS, no, there's something we must perish as Kenyans. No one gives a hoot about what you do within your own country. This thing called international community, what is it? It's a lawless entity. If you can define it, it's a lawless entity. It's a criminal syndicate. Because who leads the so-called international community? The US, China is there, Russia is there.
Don't we?
So they couldn't care less about international law. They don't care about international law. So what is this about? We're looking bad before the international community. Who is it? Who are we looking bad before? Okay, what do they do? Do you care to find out what they do themselves? They don't care. They don't give a hoot about international law or the UN Charter or genocide. Otherwise, what's happening in Gaza? What's happening in Gaza? Do you know there was a case in a British court? Human rights defenders took the British government to court that you cannot supply Israeli Defense Forces with fighter jet spare parts because you are abating genocide in Gaza. Do you know what the judge ruled? Do you know what he ruled? It's okay for that to continue. What do you mean? What do you mean? Board of Peace is about what? That thing Donald Trump has set up. What is it about? So why can the UN system take charge? Because it was set up to take charge of international peace and security. Certainly, Trump unilaterally has set up something called Board of Peace, just unilaterally. And it's working. It's got money. It's going to rebuild Gaza, whatever that means. It will find itself in Congo and Sudan. No, if you're a president and you care about what people say about what you do, you are a spectacular failure. For that's what it means. You are a spectacular failure. Because it's about selfishness on the international stage. Selfishness, my interests. It's my interests that I'm preoccupied with. And I want to extract the best deal for myself and for my people. That's what it is. It's not like I'm going to look bad. It's not like that. And there's evidence when we see what's happening. Like in Sudan, Kenya is not even an actor in the Sudanese civil war. It's not an actor. It's not. It's not an actor. It doesn't feature anywhere. There are big guns there. The big guns in the Sudanese civil war, and we know who they are. They're there. Saudi Arabia is there. United Arab Emirates is there. Aren't they? Are we at the par with those countries? Egypt is there. Aren't they there? And where you have UAE, there's US lingering in the background. They're dealing in the gold. Dubai. Backing who? Some are for rapid support forces. Some are for Sudanese armed forces. You pick your choice. Russia is there. Iran is there. Turkey is there. What is it that we don't know? They're giving logistical, technological support to those forces. And that's why the war is protracted. Neither of the force is winning it. Why? Because there are forces backing those powers, rather backing those forces. Isn't that? Is Kenya one of them? It's not. It can be a conduit for all sorts of things, but Nairobi does not have what it takes to be central to the Sudanese civil war. It doesn't. Let me put it to you. Then the passport thing. Well, that's what happens. And your passport, our passport is soft. It's not a hard passport. So it's a soft passport. But fraud, American passports you can access, British, what have you. There's no system that is tamper-proof. Go find out. South Africans are grappling with a lot of corruption in the immigration sector involving passports getting into the hands of organized syndicates and criminals. They're doing something about it, and they're talking about it publicly. So there's no system that is tamper-proof. But their passport will not go below the passport of Nigeria or Kenya. It will remain where it is. Because there are things that back up your passport, your economy. How economically consequential are you? How are you diplomatically consequential? How are you scientifically consequential? Those are the things that give weight to your passport. Not that some rebel person has got access to your passport, then it's going to lose ranking. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't. So our passport will not lose anything because some rebel person was found with it. And in any case, within that region, South Sudanese have had access to our passport for the longest time to travel, haven't they? During civil war. People from Somalia have had access to our passport for the longest time, haven't they? Because we are in a region that is riven by civil war. And those actors, for them to travel, you have to facilitate their travel. Doesn't it work like that? Historically, it's been like that. Mandela used to travel on other countries' passports. Nelson Mandela, when they were fighting against apartheid, those blacks in South Africa used to get foreign passports from other African countries to travel. It's like that. So, but Mandela was on the terrorist list in the US, wasn't he? He was. So would you say if you are Kenya or Guinea or Algeria or Ethiopia, you gave Mandela a passport, you've given a passport to a terrorist? Well, I'm not saying that Hameti's brother has a right to a Kenyan passport. I'm saying these things can only be understood historically, the way things work. They are not moral questions.
Allow me to ask you, Weston, is it your view?
Proceed.
Is it your view that the issue surrounding Hemeti's brother getting or accessing the passport, among others who have been listed now, is supposed to be a non-issue, especially knowing their influence and the amount of hemorrhage they have created in their country in matters genocide? What's your opinion on that?
It's a non-issue because I'm telling you that genocide is facilitated by influential actors. You're not listening to me?
I am. I'm just trying to be clear on what you're saying.
Those forces, and those forces are getting logistical support, militarily drones to commit genocide. How many drones are we supplying to any of those forces? Do you have the capacity? But the likes of Turkey are supplying drones there. Russia, Iran. To do what? To kill people. So what is it about a non-issue? It's a big issue, of course, genocide. But to place Kenya centrally in that conflict is a stretch. What I see is local politics playing themselves out in Sudan. It's a stretch. We don't have the capacity to elongate the Sudanese civil war. We don't. We don't have money. We don't have a budget for that. You need money. You need budget to support rebel forces. Do we have it? We don't. So a passport, by the way, he didn't need a Kenyan passport because he could get a Sudanese passport or an Ethiopian passport or a Ugandan passport at that level. You can get any other country's passport. You don't know. At that level. So what is it? It's not like it's a non-issue. We're the one who's blowing it out of proportion because of local politics. That's the point I'm making. Otherwise, how influential are we compared to Egypt, for instance, which is backing Sudanese armed forces? How influential are we compared to Egypt? In that, how influential are we compared to Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates? How influential are we diplomatically, economically? How influential are we compared to Iran, geopolitically, technologically, economically? Russia, Turkey, they are all there. Ethiopia is there.
So is it your argument, Western? And sorry for you are really raising very important issues in terms of the political bigwigs that are walking in and out of South Sudan. However, then does it justify the killings that are happening in South Sudan, in Sudan? What's your take on that? That's what I'm really concerned about.
No, that's not a question, because no one should be killed. That's not a question. What you've asked is not a question.
Then by us facilitating their movement, are we not then, in other words, agreeing to whatever is happening and the criminality that is happening there?
No, but let me ask you, why can't those people be arrested? Because the US can arrest those people. They went to Venezuela and picked a sitting president. They can arrest them, can't they? Don't have the capacity? They do. They have the capacity to arrest them. How come they haven't? How come they have not gone for them and picked them? They can do it.
I think the argument here is, Weston, the argument here is that we are looking as if whatever is happening in South Sudan or in Sudan is none of our business. And therefore, they can fix their problem. But remember, we are coming from the angle of we are a brother's keeper. And whatever is happening in Sudan, it has more proximity and effect to Kenya. Unlike America, of course, they have their other geopolitical interest and economic interest and the extraction machine that they have planted in Africa across over the continent. However, for us to be able to sit back and facilitate the non-criminals, the non-warlords, to me, that is where I have a bone of contention. And not necessarily if they can come in like they did in Venezuela.
You're actually contradicting yourself, because if you are a regional actor and you want to resolve that conflict, you don't call them criminals. You don't. How do you mediate? If you take sides and characterize, it's like when Nairobi was mediating between Sudan, when it was the current South Sudan, the forces allied to John Garang and Khartoum, you could not afford to call either side criminals. You have to mediate. So you can't call Hemeti a criminal if you're Nairobi and you know what it means to mediate.
So what is
because
missing?
We'll have
what is missing then? Answer me that. What is missing? Because Evidently, we are labeling them criminals based on the crimes that have happened, crimes against humanity, the massacre that has happened.
But I'm saying it's who is doing it. But if you're a president of Kenya, you can't label them criminals because it's your best interest to resolve that conflict. And you can't be a mediator by labeling either of the sides. You have to bring both sides or all factions at a table to find a resolution to the conflict. So you can call Hamid a criminal. But if you're president of Kenya or Uganda, you can't. He went to Uganda the other day, wasn't he, Hamid? Wasn't he in Uganda the other day? And the next time you'll see him in Ethiopia. Next time you'll see him in South Africa. You'll be welcome.
So
that's how it works.
We are not disagreeing. And actually, I like the fact that you say, if you're going to mediate, you're not going to label people, because it becomes difficult then to be able to help people to come to the table and have a conversation. But of immediacy, and I think we're not dismissive of the argument, but it's also concerning that obviously there's going to be a trickle-down effect, the fact that whatever is happening in the region eventually will affect us. So if, as a country, and Nairobi, which has an interest in ensuring that its borders are not breached, because obviously we've seen the issue with Somalia, we've seen the issue with South Sudan, and we've seen Congo. There's so many people who are coming to our country, and this is affecting a few other elements about our state. Would it be then not be prudent for Nairobi to ensure that, if anything, not to facilitate some things? And again, the US is complicit, obviously. It also has an interest in Nairobi, and they have their own plan. But isn't it in the best interest of Nairobi to ensure that they don't become a conduit for some of the things that are going on in Sudan?
You see, the problem with us is that we are midgets when it comes to history of Kenya. We are midgets. That's the most unfortunate thing. Kenya supported apartheid regime in South Africa. What was apartheid regime? The apartheid 100%. Regime was accused by the UN of committing atrocities, crimes against humanity. But Nairobi got along with the apartheid regime. One of the few African countries that got along with the apartheid regime in South Africa. The Felicien Kabuga, the mastermind of the Rwandan genocide, for the longest time was holed up in Nairobi. You don't know that? He was holed up in Nairobi for many years. Holed up in Nairobi. So we've always cuddled criminals.
But remember, Western partly, that's why South Africans had an issue with us. That's why Tanzania leans more to the south than it does to the region. And that's what I'm saying. As a consequence of some of the decisions, it has an impact on us, doesn't it? And we cannot dismiss that.
Impact on what does that mean? Impact how?
For instance, until quite recently, South Africans would come to the country without requiring a visa for 90 days until it was reciprocated after a while, isn't it? So we cannot dismiss 100% and say that, it's not important, but your argument is valid to the extent that we are probably small in the region and conduits are not necessarily as powerful as we'd want to think. And so this is a small impact and does not have a big bearing on us.
You see, we have not defined our identity geopolitically. That's why we have not. As far as Pan-Africanism is concerned, we fall nowhere. We fall nowhere. And that's why the reasons as to why when we attempt, for instance, to run for AU Commission chair, we don't get that position. We don't get it. Because for the rest of the continent, we just wishy-washy. We've never defined ourselves. Clearly, who are we within the African continent and within the global south? We've not even joined BRICS. We have not joined it. Other countries are going there. And it's not something that began yesterday. Historically, that's what we are. We're wishy-washy diplomatically. That's what we are. So for you to say it's going to have an impact with us, I'm saying it will not going to have an impact with us. Because for us, as long as we're okay with the US is okay with us, that's fine. It's on these platforms where I hear, somebody was saying yesterday, no, President William Ruto has never been invited by Donald Trump to the Oval Office. No, he's not going to shake Donald Trump's office. A Kenyan saying that, those are atrocious things. Who talks like that? Who talks like that?
Western, I agree with you. There's a lot of meat in what you're saying. I totally agree. Kenya has, in our alignment, our posturing in terms of international relations has been really clearly wishy-washy. We're not very clear on that. I see Eli's hand is up. Western will come back because I think there's much more to discuss on this. Eli, I see your
Yes,
hand is up.
I would love for us to give some right of reply from also one of the colleagues that is joining us on this other line, and that is Sitati. I see you, Marabu Stocks. Just be on standby for that. However, unfortunately, we are having some struggles here based on the topic of conversation because TikTok is very, very sensitive to some of the terms that are being used, and therefore we are receiving a lot of warnings. However, we'll try our best to remain as diplomatic as possible. This is not meant to create panic or to create unnecessary tension amongst our viewers and listeners. However, it's a very heated debate that requires us to be sober even as we discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the conversation. 39 minutes after 9 p.m. Kenyan time, we are discussing the matters that surround the Kenyan passport RSF scandal, the international relations, and regional politics. On set, we have Sitati Wasilwa, who is a political analyst, that is political risk analyst, a very big watcher of geopolitics. And also the other side, we have Weston. Weston, last time we had touch, he told me he is into IR2 and he lectures on the same. And of course, we're being hosted and co-hosted with Mizani 254, streaming live on all our social media pages. And we also have a broadcast that is happening concurrently on KOTFM.co.ke and also on our YouTube channel that is at KOTFM_KE. Now, Sitati, I know there's a lot that has been said, and you might just want to have a quick right of reply or contribution. I'll come to you, and then we can cross over back to OBEDS team. Go ahead, sir. No question for you.
Well, I may not really have so much to say in regards to the contributions that have been flying around. So, because I mean, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to once we have different opinions on these issues, is then we can try to create much more sense out of them. But the bottom line for me, I think on whatever is happening around the region, definitely on the international scale, I don't really think. I mean, maybe there will be a serious beating on Kenya. But definitely, I mean, the murmurs, the concerns that will arise from the Kenyan public will definitely be loud as usual, and I think, I mean, looking at it from that, perspective, the most important thing for me is to at least have an administration that is geared towards, protection of human rights. But then again, on the realistic front, that may not really work because states, governments, I mean, their major motivation is their interests, which are also intertwined with the interests of those who lead those particular states. So it's an interesting region to focus on, I think, as the year goes on.
All right, interesting region to focus on, you say, Sitati. And quite a lot of response also coming in from the chat. Kabuya Muito, thank you for joining the call. You say, power and interest and not morality is the better prism to assess regional and global politics. Good/bad people, good/bad deeds won't cut it. Azam is asking, who is dealing in gold in Sudan and agriculture in Congo? I have no answer. Him of himself is asking us, rather reminding us, one of the reasons why we say one term. I guess it's a good term to use, one term, because one term has really clobbered everyone in the, what I will say, was it, what do you call them? The elections that just happened, the by-elections. And Sitati, maybe that's a story for another day, is it?
I mean, maybe before some of us go to rest, probably a quick overview wouldn't be that bad. But I think just looking at the bits of it before other people can chime in the discussion. Well, we probably expect too much from the so-called united opposition, but the mere fact that this time, when you compare the political temperatures with the by-elections that occurred yesterday and the previous ones in November, then you get a sense that was this a strategic or tactical retreat by the so-called united opposition, or are they just blank and they have no idea on what what political strategy really demands? Because for you to create a name for yourselves, in politics, to build your name, it's all about the perception that you create after there. Now, the UDA party won most of those by-elections in November last year. This time round, they are again coming out on the top. What is that? What are these victories? What is the kind of the message that is getting out to the public? That it is going to be a little bit complex to probably send William Ruto packing come 2027. That's the kind of message that is coming out here. So the united opposition, to be honest, this was their time for them to demonstrate to Kenyans that at least they are strong enough, they know what they are doing, and they are ready to take, head on. UDA and William Ruto head on. That's this, what we really expected them to do on the minimum. But as usual, we will hear all manner of allegations. Vote rigging and whatnot. This time round, there wasn't widespread violence. We have to be very realistic. We have to be very honest on that. Number two, we haven't really had complaints about votes rigging for the by-elections that took place yesterday. So to me, the bottom line is this: I think the united opposition has a lot to do. In as much as we have significant, when you look at the sentiments against William Ruto, they are significant. You cannot ignore that. But these victories then definitely paint a picture that perhaps the united opposition really needs to work on its strategy. This was their time. They slept on the job.
All right, that is Sitati Wasilwa and Sitati Wasilwa. Thank you very much for making time to join us this Friday. And you had asked us to give you time until 1:15 or 1:45, and I guess it's time for you to pen up. But that's it. We'll be looking forward to having you in the next engagement. Asante sana for coming on. OBEDS, I see your hand is up, so I'll cross over to you. But in the meantime, it is true. This was time for the united opposition to shows their claws, but clearly it was a clean sweep because the UDA faction was able to sweep Isiolo, Mbeere North, and Kakamega by elections in full. I don't know why, OBEDS, your hand is up, but I'll give you the mic so that you can take us to the next level. Good evening.
To make a contribution to that by-election because he was exiting. But I think we need to. I have Marabou stocks. I've got Real Joe. Albert, I saw your request, but I tried to admit you and there was a problem. I don't know. We couldn't get you on board. But you could try again and try and join the conversation. That said, in international relations and politics, honestly, it's about interest. And I think that's quite clear. And I think there's a joke that goes and somebody says, if you really want to be a man of means, it's easy to, what is black and white to ordinary folk is always, it's neither gray, it's never black, it's never anything for people, men of means. Try and work hard. Joe, I see you want to be a sponsor and you're working very hard. To the contribution, what do you think of the passport issue that we're talking about, and generally our position in the international system and regional politics? What do you make of this conversation? Karibu, Real Joe.
Do we still have the
Real Joe, can you hear me? Amenda kulala.
I guess he's not
Amenda
available.
kulala.
You want to proceed to
Marabu,
Marabu?
I invite you to make a contribution. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining the space. Let me allow you to make a contribution to the conversation.
Well, greetings, Mizani. Am I coming through?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So I think first of all, we should be very, very careful in the manner at which we understand things and how we look at things. And sometimes it's very easy for us to talk in support of the side that we support politically and forget the really important issues. First of all, we have laws and legislations of how somebody can acquire a Kenyan passport, that you have to be born, naturalized, you have to have stayed in Kenya for over 7 years. And these precepts have to be met in order for you to acquire this Kenyan passport. Remember that the Kenyan passport is a document for the citizen of Kenya to enable this citizen to travel, right? And as we joined the Jumuiya, the Kenyan passport became part of the Jumuiya. And we have laws, we have rules, we have procedures of how you should get the said passport. And the first thing before even we start looking at the international laws or the international relations is to see if the municipal, the local laws were followed in acquiring such documents. So when we come and we see that the members of RSF down from Darfur, somebody from Zimbabwe has been given this Kenyan passport, we want to know, how did they acquire this passport? What criterion did they fulfill in order to be given this passport? And we find that it was acquired fraudulently. From the little that I've heard is that even the telephone numbers that they gave, even the photos that they gave, were all given fraudulently. So the issuance of the said passport is null and void ab initio. And the most disheartening thing is that this was not raised by Kenya. This was raised from the United States of America. This has been a concern about the Kenyan passports. In the later years, we had the Kenyan passports being degraded by the UK after some Somalis were found with a Kenyan passport and they were carrying out terrorist activities, and we were prevented from accessing the UK without visa.
Mhm.
So from then we had to apply for visas to go to the UK. And the same is happening right now in America. And it happened initially with the Minnesota case, whereby we had Somalis acquire Kenyan citizenship, acquire the Kenyan passport, and they go and do criminalities in the United States, including money laundering. And right now we have this same problem with RSF heads of command, with their spouses, with their children. And even if we are nothing in the international scale. Even if Kenya is a small republic which cannot cause tremors internationally, we must respect ourselves. We must respect our documents. We must respect our governance. It's okay for other people not to respect us as a country, but it's really, really, really a downfall for Kenyans themselves not to respect their own country. We have Kenyans abducted in Tanzania carrying the Kenyan passport, and the ministry does nothing about it. Okay? And then we have now non-Kenyans receiving the Kenyan document. And for somebody, especially like Western, somebody in academia, to really try and justify or to give reason is really cheapening the academic endeavor of it, because we might let this slide because the person who is in office is somebody you support. But this person is not going to be in office forever. Yet the things that they do today are going to have long-term consequences in the relationships of Kenya vis-a-vis the international relations. So let's not have this idea that somebody that I support, then I can cut slack when it comes to issues of international security, when it comes to issues of law and order, when it comes to issue a procedure, right? So it's really upon the Kenyan system, and whether it has failed or not is still out there, because this issue appears to have happened about a year back. And the only reason that it was red flagged was because of the United States, meaning that Kenyans themselves did not blow the whistle on this one, right? The same thing is happening with the sale of Safaricom, if you look at it. The whistle is being blown from the UK, from the Vodacom side in the UK, and they are trying to disassociate themselves, meaning that in Kenya, we've become either complicit or we are too afraid to do the right thing, right? But it does not give credence just because we are unable to stop immigration from giving genociders and terrorists from other countries our passport today, meaning that we cannot do something about it later in the future. And for us to really say that the Kenyan passport carries no weight, what was the purpose of them getting the Kenyan passport? It is because there's an embargo on them. It is because they are sanctioned. And it is because that the only way they could get that international connection was through this passport that you consider to have no weight internationally. They have a reason why they get this. And to make matters worse, forgetting even about the RSF and all this, somebody like Chivayo Wicknell, this Zimbabwean, why is this person being given a Kenyan passport? For what reason? It's simply because the executive, the people in power, feel that they can do it. And that goes to abuse of office, right? So we cannot have people abusing office, dishing out documents like confetti and trying to make excuses for them, right? And it's not an issue of whether you support the current government or not. It's an issue of right, wrong, the rule of law and procedure. And I think this is the dichotomy that many people fail to get, especially when you see people who are supporting the government. They fail to have this distinction between right and wrong when it comes to the current regime. That you can support a government and still check it and still demand that they do the right thing. It's not an issue of politicization of things. It's an issue of the right thing happening, because sooner or later, these people who hold the Kenyan passport, these people who you've given citizenship, will become the citizens of Kenya and will become the Kenyan problem. And it will be us, all of us, to bear. That small decision that you made will affect all Kenyans in general. Thank you very much for the time, and God bless.
Thank you, Marabu. I don't know if the real Joe is back. Real Joe, are you back on the mic?
Yes, Obed. Sorry, I received a call, so I was a little bit off the mic.
Umeanza kuwa sponsor, mdogo anasumbua. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, OBEDS. You member sponsor taongea nyuma ya tent. The speakers in the panel, Eli and SITATI, Marabooks, and the listeners joining. I can see Stella, the analyst, there. First of all, OBEDS, just to give my opening remark, diplomacy is very complex, and most of the times diplomacy will never be politically correct. In fact, in most cases, diplomacy usually lacks moral perfection, because this is what we are looking at in this particular case. When I say diplomacy is complex, I mean, I want to agree with Western. One thing about mediation, and we've seen it over the years, I mean, we've been involved in a lot of mediations ourselves in our country that have actually borne fruit. And if you look at how they were conducted, I mean, there was no moral perfection in it. If you look at Moi's negotiation that actually ended up giving birth to the CPA of 2005 in Sudan, I mean, the Moi tactic was, I mean, who should stop shooting? There's no criminal in both sides. So if you look at them as criminals, I mean, locally, Kenyans are going to look at them as criminals. That's why I said it is usually politically incorrect in our case, in our country. But for the geopolitics, I mean, it is such a complex issue. Like right now, we find ourselves in this issue of passports. But again, diplomacy is a game of interests. There are several other key players in diplomacy that can pull those strings to the extent that it is not such a simple thing. Who knows whether maybe this passport issue has some hand from Saudi Arabia or the UAE, who have much bigger interests there in terms of gold and things like that. Those are things that, because if you look at the UDA government, their way of diplomacy has mostly been economic diplomacy. So they've been in the UAE getting all these financial aids. Who knows whether part of that financial aid, maybe there's something you're told, as we facilitate this, this person just look for a passport, and diplomacy, it is not perfect around the world. If you look at Israel, they were fighting Hamas. The same Hamas that have been branded terrorists are being hosted by other countries, including even the Saudi Arabias. That is diplomacy. It is dirty. At the end of the day, most of the Kenyans will want the very bare minimum. Locally in our media, it will be all round. We are funding terrorists. But for our own diplomacy, we cannot, and I will borrow this from Western, we cannot brand them as terrorists. We are not going to be able to mediate if we are looking at neutrality. Of course, this passport issue also pinches into our neutrality, because if the other side feels that we are facilitating, RSF and things like that, then again, that is a blow to our neutrality, in terms of trying to resolve these conflicts and so on and so forth. But we've always played the big brother. Kenya has played the big brother, and it has perfected that. So it is not going to end anytime soon. Sometimes playing the big brother it comes with at a cost. I mean, you're seeing whatever is happening right now. Also, the people who are blowing these sort of things. I mean, Kenya would not be in a position to blow a whistle when it comes to America and those other advanced countries, because we don't have information. They do have information. They can use that against you to get something. And that is diplomacy, But we know so well that at the end of the day, we have to look at what is at stake. So, for example, right now, we have two warring sides in Sudan. The key, what is at stake is to ensure that these neighbors who are fighting and burning their house next door don't end up burning our house too. So that is where mediation comes in. And as we mediate, we also have to ensure, and again, as it is, as complex as diplomacy is, the same way neutrality is as complex as, in fact, neutrality is ambiguous. It is such an ambiguous concept when it comes to diplomacy. Someone would argue that with issuing the passport to RSF, we are not neutral. But who knows whether the other side also do not have passports? I mean, this facilitation has to happen both sides for you to be able to mediate, for you to be able to try and ensure the neighbor's house does not burn and burn you down with it. We've had scenarios. We had the transition parliament for Somalia. right here in our soil. And we hosted we hosted the Somalis in 2002 to 2004. We've played the big brother role here, OBEDS. So I think from where I sit, it is not going to be politically relevant for us. But again, Kenyans will not understand. The local Kenyan will not understand. We are looking at it on the moral compass. It is not moral. It will never be moral. Nowhere around the world, when Maduro was going to be picked by the US, in terms of when Donald Trump ordered, how many bodies were dropped for Maduro to be accessed? That is how immoral it is when it comes to all these issues of geopolitics. At the end of the day, there are fundamental issues that also are exposed. Our systems, how porous they are in terms of these documents. Kenyans will look at it as our sovereignty at sale, because for you to get a passport, for you to have a passport, that is our document. For it to land in a foreign hand, Kenyans will ask these questions. So the government must also prepare to be able to answer these questions to Kenyans as well. I mean, accountability is also important, much as we, from where I sit, would understand the complexity and what is at stake. So all this must be put into consideration. We must look also at our history and what we've done before, how we've participated in these things before. And as you know, our former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, is very active on the DRC. I think there was an interview I saw. He was asked just I don't know if it was yesterday or the other day. Uhuru is active in the DRC issues and so on and so forth. So it will never stop. So we just have to. The government has to be prepared to be able also to answer the tough questions to Kenyans, because again, accountability to us is more important. That is what Kenyans will feel. But at the end of the day, we also have to understand that we have neighbors outside, and that game, when it comes to the neighbors outside, it is not as clean as we might want to look at it. Thank you very much, OBEDS.
Thank you, the real Joe. Ella, I think I bring it back to you for Brass to bring the curtains down.
Yeah, thank you very much, OBEDS. I don't know if that was the climax. However, I hear you, Joe, when you talk about the...
Barabu mentioned me. Why don't you give me a right of reply?
I will give you that. Weston, proceed.
Look, OBEDS, what we lack is capacity for complexity. It is. Because we're blinkered. You see, this paraphernalia like passports, IDs, these are colonial artifacts, really. They're artifacts, colonial artifacts. To separate people, to make it difficult for Black people to travel in Africa. That's what it is. It's difficult to travel in Africa because of this thing called a passport. It's even difficult to walk within Kenya because the police could stop you and ask you for an ID, and things could go horribly wrong. That we believe in these things shows that really we really don't know what's happening around us. Then, people who can access this paraphernalia are not ordinary people. You acquire a passport because of your fortune. If you went to the US today with over 800,000 US dollars, you could easily get a green card. And that's a pathway to citizenship. Were you born in the US? Why are you? For 1 million plus. You get green card on the spot. And many countries have got that provision. What is this thing about naturalization for mere mortals? Then organized crime, transnational crime across borders. These are people who will have access to passports, irrespective of what your laws say. They will. They'll walk into Nyayo House and walk out with a passport within the same day. Or they may not even go there. The passport will be delivered to them wherever they are. Organized crime, transnational crime. That's how it works, because these people have to move very fast. Now, you bring in morality and ethics, right and wrong. Well, you don't really understand what's going on. Frankly speaking, you don't. Secondly, You don't run the state as an ordinary citizen. So do you have powers on who can access the Kenyan passport and who can't? You don't run the state. It is those who are in charge of the state, who will issue these documents, who the ones who dictate who to get and who does not get. Isn't that the case? Well, what does our constitution say? It says a lot about dual citizenship, what. But there are many people in the government, previous governments in Kenya have dual citizenship. Don't they hold positions in government? What can you do about it yourself? What can you do about it? But you can take me to the constitution. It says here, for you to occupy this office, you must be a Kenyan citizen and hold it. Well, those things are meant for you, mere mortal. Then, OBEDS, Gaddafi was for one Africa. What if Gaddafi had succeeded and we had only one passport? Let's give it to him. It was utopian. But let's give it to him. He succeeded. And Africa, we had just one passport. Would you be frothing on the sides of your mouth because a Ugandan has got a passport that looks like you, or a Sudanese? Or let's say Sudan was part of the East African community and we had one passport. Would really matter which passport Hameti was carrying? I think we must be broad. Insularity is too much. And it does not help. We must be broad. These things are not helping you and me. These passport things. They're not. But they're for the elite, to do elite things, that you can be invested in those things. You're reactionary. You're reactionary. If a Somali leaves Somalia, the country has collapsed. It means the systems are not working, institutions are not working. This person wants to move out of Africa. Why don't you give them a passport? Why don't you? Why don't you give them a passport? What do you mean? You always imagine they're going to commit crime? Is that what you imagine? You're facilitating the person to move. If they're looking for better prospects in life, so be it. A passport is just that, for movement. It's for travel. That's a travel document. But for some reason, we attach a lot of importance to it. This is just a travel document. Nothing more than that. And if somebody does not have a travel document for them from the home country, you can surely facilitate that. Can't you do it? So, what I'm saying is this. We really make a lot of criticism against people who are running the state. But if we were in those positions, we are just as reactionary as they are. We're not going to make things easier for anybody. We'll still implement those colonial rules, colonial laws, colonial edicts that just weigh people down like a yoke. We celebrate them. So what would be the point of somebody getting into power and they're telling me how? Why would I be so fixated on who carries the Kenyan passport or not? Why would I be fixated? That I travel and I see you carrying a Kenyan passport. I ask you, are you a Kenyan? You tell me you are not. Should I get angry? Should I get annoyed? Is that my business? Do I own Kenya? Is that my piece of land? The president doesn't own Kenya. Nobody owns Kenya. So this business, they're carrying our passport. They're carrying your passport. Is it your passport? Let them move and travel. And if they commit crime, the law will kick in and they'll be arrested. American passports, they get into wrong hands. And this is a country that is technologically advanced. UK passports get into wrong hands. Canadian passports get into wrong hands. These things happen. There's no country that has got a tamper-proof immigration system. What is this business about who has got access to a passport? What do you want to do with it? What do you want to do with the passport? With me, I'm satisfied. I've got a travel document I can move. Whoever has it, it's up to you. You commit crime, the law will catch up with you. If they don't catch up with you, you are lucky. Like we want to police people and gatekeepers. OBEDS, this is gatekeeping, if you don't know what it means. And you find it in many professions in Kenya, just gatekeeping.
So, anyway.
You can't access it because of that and that. So,
question.
I think the challenge is that you don't get me. If you are in the field that some of us are in, you cannot afford insularity. You cannot afford to be fixated on things. You have to have a broader picture. You can't afford to be blinkered. You can't. But you are blinkered and you think I'm panting for the government. No, the things I'm raising, these things cannot be impeached. They can't be impeached. If we're talking about Pan-Africanism, then we must leave that philosophy, that ideology. We must leave it. We can't say, no, Pan-Africanism, but at the same time, why are you carrying a Kenyan passport and you're a Burundian. What does it mean? What does that even mean? But that's my concern, that we're too reactionary as a country. We're too reactionary. We don't get it. We have a problem because the president is making it easier for people to come to Kenya from the other parts of the continent without, a lot of travel restrictions. We have a problem with that. Why do you have a problem with that? Because you're reactionary. Because you're mired in colonialism and colonial edicts, institutions, and paraphernalia. That's the problem.
So, Weston, we are time out and we need to end the call. But you have valid arguments. At the same time, the arguments being raised by Marabu are equally valid, because when you talk about, you talk about the rule of law. It's something I believe. Do you believe in the rule of law? Let me just get that question. Do you believe in the rule of law?
Look here, this is what I'm saying. Look
my
here,
answer is a yes or a no question.
No.
Do you?
Yes or no? Let me explain.
It is. I'm just asking a simple question. Do you believe in the rule of law?
Let me answer that question the way I want to.
No, I need a yes or a no answer.
On the international stage. Here we're talking about international stage. We're talking about international stage here.
So, do you believe in the rule of law?
What counts is not the rule of law.
Do you believe in adherence to the Constitution then?
Eli, I think just give him that leverage, because I think it's important also.
Yeah.
There's one thing that we
understand some of these things.
Just a minute. Eli, I get the line of questioning, but also there's something about the international system that it's an amorphous grouping.
That in itself, I do not dispute, OBEDS. I hear me out. And I'm not even disputing what Western is asking. I'm asking this question based on very pertinent issues that are being raised by most of the speakers that have already spoken, which is Kenyans cannot sit down pretty and not question, why is this happening against the very document that we have all sworn to protect, which is our Constitution. It does not matter who is in office, who wields political power. What matters is they need to go by the book. And that's why I'm asking, do you believe in the rule of law? Do you ascribe to the Constitution that we call the Constitution 2010? There are things in that document that we cannot just ignore simply because we need to acquire regional brotherhood or camaraderie, whichever you want to call it. So my question was not to dismiss what Mr. Western is raising. My question was then to bring the concerns that Eli is having, that if the president acknowledges that he actually went ahead to facilitate an individual that from the international eye is creating a human catastrophe in his country, then what are we trying to communicate? Be it that we are benefiting, let's say, by the war that is in the country, then what does it say about us as a country? Because then we cannot be here pointing fingers at other nations for practicing the same, yet when it comes to our side, we are willing to, fumble over that issue. And that's why I'm asking that question. OBEDS.
That's fine. I'll allow Western 2 minutes to respond to that, then we finalize the
OBEDS.
conversation.
This is what I mean by we're insular. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. And it's not like he was convicted after being sworn in, it was before. But is indeed the president of the United States of America. Convicted felon. He is president acting on behalf of the people of the United States of America. And he's very consequential. He even went to Venezuela and picked a president from that country. A sovereign state. Convicted felon. Didn't he receive Vladimir Putin the other day in Alaska? Vladimir Putin has got an indictment by the International Criminal Court, for those who don't know. They met. Did India arrest him? Did India arrest him? They met. Had a nice time. They parted ways. What is this about rule of law? What is it about rule of law? Netanyahu He's been indicted. Doesn't he just move all over the place? He goes wherever he wants. No one bothers to arrest him. Which rule of law are you talking about? Look, these things, OBEDS, you analyze them not from what they ought to be. You analyze them as they are. Get the difference. International politics, your politics at home domestically, not what they ought to be. The Constitution is about what ought to be, aspirational. For an ideal society, we have to adhere to this Constitution, aspirational. What obtains in reality? Focus on that. There's a lot of impunity. There's a lot of violation of people's fundamental rights. There's no regard for international law, no regard for the UN Charter, no regard for sovereignty. What is it about do you believe in the rule of law? That question is neither here nor there. The law is there, but it's more recognized in breach than observance. What do we know, honestly speaking?
Precisely. Actually, I think that's the place to leave it, because for anybody practicing in this space, it's quite clear that the international system has no world government. Nobody rules over the other. It's ruling by consent in some sense. There's reward and there's punishment. It is not necessarily something enforceable, but we have held ourselves to some aspirations which might be observed at times and not necessarily at times. It's always about interest, and a country doesn't care as long as it gets what it wants. And I think that's quite clearly put, which is why I did say earlier that, Eli, when you come back in another life, come back as a man of means. What is black and white for mere mortals like me and you is an amorphous thing. It's never any color. And you can look at what has happened with Epstein files. Look at the people involved in that business. Anybody can condemn, charge, all whatever. So the international system is a very fluid system, and we must accept that there are concerns that, yes, as Kenyans, we might have questions around what has happened. It has an impact in some sense, and I think there is a consensus that the ordinary folk would suffer. The people and the elite who are in positions of authority wouldn't be punished for it, because they have insulated themselves from some of these things, at least by virtue of the positions they hold. So, as a consequence, there's much more that we need to do probably internally as a country. Demand for a better system, and one that works for everybody.
But you just said how things work do not work in that way.
Listen, Eli.
Yes.
Listen, Eli.
I'm listening.
Let me finish.
I'm listening very keenly, because
I'm not contradicting myself.
I haven't.
What I'm saying is, listen, no. What I'm trying to say is, let us take that responsibility. Whatever we aspire to achieve, we push to create that system. But I can guarantee you that it will still not be foolproof. There are a few things that will go wrong. Not everybody will agree with it. So either way, we must simply create what we think can work, but it's not going to be perfect because other people have concerns around it. I can't say it any better, and not because I support this government. I'm sure you know who I not vote for.
I mean, it's not about the support. It's about the ideology behind the issues we are raising. I mean, OBEDS, if you can hear me, it's not really about supporting or being against it. It's about the ideology of the things we want to achieve, the things we believe should work for all of us. So when we say the system is not functional for all of us, and then you say it's a function for a few, and then we have to also understand this is just how things work, I'm left wondering which side or direction should I take.
Let me ask you.
However,
what will you be given for free? Is there a free lunch?
Well, you tell me about it.
You must work to get whatever it is that you want. So your aspirations and whatever everybody wants to espouse, if people see it in you, then create that system. But as it is, Eli, much as we want to preach and belabor what we want to belabor, the reality that we face, and unfortunately so, is that the current system and how it's structured works that way. We have to recreate it and uproot it. It must be fought. It has to require a revolution. But eventually, look at us. We are fighting colonialists. They're speaking their language. We don't like our fellow brothers in Africa. Somebody speaks French, somebody speaks English, another one speaks Swahili. Look at how we talk about Tanzanians. Why? They speak Swahili. We speak English or better English. Are we saying we are more colonized? So it's just what it is, Ilan. But the reality is, if we want to create a system, somebody has to create it. And if it's you and people believe that this is the system we're going to work with, we'll go with it.
What a way to conclude the conversation. We still have some mic requests, but unfortunately we are 6 minutes out, and that means we need to really get to the final remarks. The real Joe, go ahead.
Eli, do you know that in 2007, when we had two conflicting parties in the name of PNU and ODM, then for the mediators to have ensured that peace was restored, I mean, if Kofi Annan would have come to Kenya and just decided that, Kibaki, you are wrong, you stole elections, you killed people in the streets, I mean, we would not have had peace, probably. I think if you look at even the previous negotiations that were not successful or fruitful, I mean, you don't lean on a side when you are mediating, and that is just about it. So for that peace in 2007 to be achieved, I mean, we know the atrocities that were committed, even though that peace deal came up with the concept of accountability, and we saw people go to The Hague to be tried over crimes against humanities. But that was like the rallying call. If you look at it, and we talk about the rule of law all the time, the law is supposed to be for social order. You as internally here, locally here in our country. But we need to also ask ourselves, who actually implements the law? Who implements the law? Who ensures that this social order is maintained? So that we have to understand that this law is for us. We, the normal, we call ourselves the civilian. It is for us. It is not for those. It is not for the state, and that is quite unfortunate. It is the reality. Even we might want to put it in whatever way we might want to define how the state has been limited. They are not. They will do it. That is it. In this case of the passport and our diplomacy, of course, someone just told me that we have to restore our diplomatic compass, but it does not mean that restoring our diplomatic compass, at the diplomacy level, we are not going to refer to RSF as people who have committed crimes against humanity. If you look at even during Moi's time, for those peace deals to be achieved, I mean, people complained that Moi went against the law, but he played the big brother role, and those progress were able to be achieved. So at the end of the day, as much as locally here we'll call the government to order and for accountability purposes, that is what we can do, and we'll still not deter the government from or the state from having to go through, I mean, making those deals and whatever it is. If the state will look at progress over order any day, and they will choose progress over that order that we think we are looking at here so much. But at the end of the day, of course, on our end, the citizens will demand accountability. As I had earlier said, it is a very complex venture, and it is not morally or politically correct for us. Thank you.
All right, that is the real. You guys are giving me a hard time. I will give you Bundi really a minute and a half. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Eli. Thank you, OBEDS. I think, this is one of the conversations that should, have taken much, I think, longer, but it's okay. Let me say that an issue look at it. First of all, in diplomatic lenses, and again, even as a nation itself, because it is very wrong for a country, in as much as you would use any form of, parallel to draw with other countries doing the same thing. It is wrong for a country because we know the happenings, and we know the country has been in conflicts from, Omar al-Bashir was overthrown until today. And you see Kenya being at the center stage of this conflict, and it has been implicated by United Nations. There is this, I think, memo which suggesting that Kenya is giving a free passage of weaponry that is being used in that conflict. That is that is a diplomatic tiff that we are engaged in. And again, we should ask ourselves really, what interest does Kenya as a nation have in that conflict, or what interest, pecuniary interest, that conflict? Because I can tell you like that Kenyans, they don't have any interest in that war. But we saw the person who is at the State House has a lot of interest in what is happening in Sudan. And that is when even actually he hosted the general of, RSF and, gave him an opportunity to form a parallel government at KICC, and nothing happened. So I think this is a complete flouting of, rule by, the international law. But we've seen it happening for quite some time. But I don't believe that we should use that as a justification for Kenya to continue doing the same thing. Another issue is, about regional politics. The country which, have been seen to support this RSF directly, it's actually Uganda. Uganda hosted Emmet last week. Kenya itself has been very consistent with its tone. It's giving a tone of, there's a conflict which is happening. But behind the scenes, we're seeing the president obnobbing with General Emmet. So this is something that can be viewed on multiple lenses. But it boils down to the person who is at the helm, the president himself. Because these are things which cannot happen without his knowledge. These are things which cannot happen without his approval. For example, giving this passport there, which was given by the president to Evelyn Cheluge to give these passports. And it is not only actually to this guy who is leading these conflicts, even the Zimbabwean guy that is Chivayo. These are people which are being given our passports just lazily because the government is, saying that we can do anything with this country and nothing can happen. So I believe that this is a conversation we need to continue having, because an average Kenyan like me and you, we shall spend a lot of time going to Nyaya House requesting for these passports, but the government will be very lackluster and very, very lazy in handing out these passports for us. But when a person comes out, a foreigner comes out who carries some, I think some business value to the current regime, they would be given out their passports, with wanton abandon, and nobody seems to care. But again, I want to say that as I conclude, Eli, that this is a problem which has been caused by this government. It's a problem. I had some people using what happened in 2006 to justify what is happening currently, and I can say that is very wrong. We shouldn't just use another wrong as a justification of another wrong, or rather to aggravate another wrong. So I think we must, go back to our senses as a nation and question the kind of decisions which the government is doing. These are decisions which are stoking a lot of diplomatic tussles, these are questions which are leading to massive loss of lives. The people are being killed in Nyala is consequential to what we are doing as a country, indirectly as a nation. So I think we must bring some sanity in our diplomatic policy and even in our governance, in as much as we want to have a good and amazing country. Thank you, Eli.
Awesome. I really hate to do this, but we must call it a night. The conversation is heavy, the conversation is juicy, and it's also keeps some of us on the edge of our seats, simply because it touches on the fundamentals of what some of you who believe in human rights are saying. There's something wrong happening in this country. I've heard the name of the former president Moi being mentioned, and we say, for those of them who believe in the afterlife, may he continue resting in peace wherever he is. But why did Moi go to South Sudan? That's a question a lot of people really never get it. The reason why, and maybe if you go and do more of the research, Moi went into South Sudan to try and support it, and until actually when it was Sudan, because there were the black Sudanese and the light-skinned Sudanese, from the northern. But the reason why he went to support South Sudan was simply because of one simple issue. Guess it, the color of the skin and the huger Nilotic region that was Southern Sudan. So when we talk about politics, it's more than just the issue of economy. It was about protecting one of us. Are we one of us? That has been the conversation here on KOTFM.
You're listening to KOTFM. Let the music play.
And we are going to continue with the musical right here on the broadcast. For those of you who love to stay longer, you can always switch on to the live video feed that is on our broadcast courtesy of Mizani 254. And you can continue also listening these through www.kotfm.co.ke. On behalf of everyone that made this a success, including the speakers, the listeners, and all of you who contributed in the chat section, my name is LIKUYANI Eli. On behalf of OBEDS, ORIKU, and we had Budi, we had the real Joe Weston, we also had earlier on SITATI.